hello.
I'm going to be awkward for the first little while. So, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, hi. My name's Ian McIntosh. I am a Canadian citizen living in Finland. Um, yeah, I'm currently studying at Tampere University of Applied Sciences in music production, and that's me.
How did you come all the way to Finland? Like, what's your story with that?
Uh, it's a bit of a long journey, but uh, the compressed version is that I lived in Canada for most of my life until 2016, and then in 2016, I moved to Turkey with my parents and my sister, where I completed high school, and then from there, I found my way to Finland, and now I'm here.
Now, as we all know, and also how I know you is through TAMK. So, why did you choose TAMK? Because you could have gone back to Canada or you could have studied somewhere else in Europe. So, why TAMK?
Well, there's the official version, which is basically I didn't want to go back to Canada, and I wanted to study music production, and there aren't that many options in Europe for like an English language education for a reasonable price. When I was searching around, there was like one in Sweden, and it was more of a conservatory, and then I found this one in Finland, and I was like, this is what I want to do, and so I applied, and thank God I got in.
So, how have you enjoyed TAMK? Since now we're coming to the end of our 2 years, so still got a little while to go, but halfway there.
I mean, I love the people here. That's the best part. And like the services like in the studios we have access to at the school are amazing. Really, I couldn't like ask for a better introduction to the music production world. Like it's been really awesome.
And have you been able to do a lot more projects because of the studios? I'm assuming. And
Oh
really
yeah, of
cool
course.
ones.
The thing with I think with a lot of production equipment in general, but definitely with music production equipment, is it's ridiculously expensive. And as a student, you can't usually afford very much of it. But at the school, they've invested a lot of money into creating these great studios for us to work in and to give us sort of almost professional level experience within those studios. So yeah, it's opened up a whole world.
That's cool. But I'm assuming that because of COVID-19 isolation, has it affected you and your work in that way, of course?
Yeah. So we no longer have access to those wonderful studios. So I've had to invest a little bit of money out of my own pocket. Um, this microphone here that you can see, something I had to purchase recently, as well as a few other technical items to continue being able to create from home.
And what is your inspiration for projects?
Yeah, so I don't know. Inspiration for me is a bit of a fickle thing. Uh, it comes and goes in waves. I have more of a sit down and work mentality, to be honest. I think creativity is something you can get better at for sure. Like obviously you need to have the want, like you gotta want to be creative, but after that you just gotta work at it. So I don't know. Searching for inspiration isn't really my style. It's more of like, this is a cool idea, let's do it. Some things I'll sit around and I'll think about for a while. Like if I'm songwriting, I feel like that's more of a different thing. But when it comes to this podcast, it was just like an idea I had, and I was like, okay, how do I get from point A to point B?
Cool. So you mentioned that the podcast. So your latest project, the Expatriot. So what is it? For those that don't know.
Well, it's a podcast, as you said. And it's a podcast that addresses sort of the topic of expatriation. I talk a little bit about my experience as an expatriate, and also I talk to a few other people about how their experience has been and how it's affected them, their personal identity and their cultural identity. This first season is focused mainly on life in Finland, so it'll be 6 episodes total, just talking about life here, what it's like to work here, what it's like to study here, and hearing a few cool stories. Got some exciting guests in the future who got some pretty fascinating stories, so I'd be excited to hear that. And I don't know, I talk a lot, so if you can handle that, then I think
Isn't that
you're
what
gonna like it.
podcasts are, though? Just listening to someone talk a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up listening to that, so for me, it's something that's comforting. I mean, I know you lived in Canada for a bit. I don't know how much you got to experience CBC, but was like all we listened to basically, and all the radio programs on there. So it's definitely a huge inspiration for me, and it's just, I don't know, it's something I enjoy listening to. So I figured I'd try and make one.
And like, why the topic of an expatriate? Because I mean, you can make a podcast about anything. So why about the expat life?
Well, you gotta kind of work with what you know, right? I think I've changed a lot since becoming an expat, an insane amount. And, I wasn't completely through high school yet. And my high school was actually extended by a year because of it. Because in Canada, you graduate not the whole of Canada. In Quebec, you graduate in grade 11. So I was about to graduate, and then I got a little extra year added on. So the whole experience was really, I think, pivotal for me, and it still is. Like, it's not over, I'm still living abroad. So I felt like it was a good place for me to talk about everything I'd experienced so far, and also just to kind of talk to other people and see if there's some shared experiences there and how they cope with all the craziness that comes with, living outside of your home country.
Yeah, I find it such an interesting topic because technically I would be an expatriate, but also I'm just a nomad because really I don't have like a home country per se. Because even though I'm living in Finland and I'm Finnish, it's not necessarily my home country, even though I was born here. But before I moved here 3 years ago, like, it was never my home. So it's a very interesting topic. And like, I've already listened to the first episode, and I'm excited to hear what others you have.
Some of the main stuff that I try to talk about, because nothing is simple when it comes to leaving your country, all those topics of like discussing identity and everything like that. It's definitely something that I don't hear about it a lot in the general like media much. I feel like expats are sort of like a forgotten portion of society. I mean, we're not like a huge portion, but we're there, and it's sort of odd because we lose contact sort of with everywhere we go. We're not really part of any place, and we just kind of, we float along because we are sort of separated from all of the societies we're a part of by nature of not being a citizen. We didn't grow up there. We're not part of the culture. And so we sort of have this outside point of view. Then the longer we stay away, the less what was our home is our home anymore. You know what I mean? So eventually you end up in this place where you don't have a home country anymore.
I think it's such a cool project that you've undertaken because you're using your experience, but then also you could have just just done multiple episodes of just you talking, but you're taking this experiences from others to try to find connections that expats have that they may not realize to each other. It is just an interesting topic because like we are such a small population that people, like you said, forget about sometimes, but there are expats. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought and you look very confused where I was going.
No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. I feel like, especially over the internet these days, conversations, like, it's really keeping your concentration when you're not like face to face with someone is a very difficult task.
Have you found that very difficult for the podcast? Because I'm assuming because you weren't able to do it at school or like on the campuses and in the studios that you've had to now do it similarly how we're doing it online. So has that made it much more of a challenge? Like, what has been challenging or easy undertaking this project?
Yeah, well, I'm developing a lot of new skills. I don't have a whole lot of experience interviewing. Like, I'm fairly competent user of the English language, but interviewing is not a skill I've had to use before, so that's interesting. And then also trying to interview over the internet is a whole other thing because you're constantly talking over the other person because of connection issues, and you're really having to, there's a bit of a skill to it. And letting people talk and not interjecting when it's not needed, I feel like is also something I've had to... Because when you're in a podcast, it can get very confusing because you're not seeing faces. So you really have to like give time to each person to speak on their own. So, I mean, I guess if I went to school for radio, I would have learned all these things, but I'm just learning them by myself now. So it's cool, though. I love taking on new projects like this because you learn so much by just doing them.
Yeah, it is really cool. And I think that's a very interesting perspective of thinking. Like, not knowing anything about it before, but then just jumping straight into it. It's a
Yeah,
really
I don't
interesting.
know. I feel
I
like
keep saying
people
interesting, but yeah.
wait around a lot too much. You know what I mean? Like I get it. It's scary putting yourself out there, but also it's a lot of fun when you just do it.
Agreed. It is. Because then the fear goes away. Once you start, then you're just like, oh, wait, this wasn't that bad actually. Like, why did I like stall so much diving hidden? Do you think TAMK has been able to allow you to do that?
Oh, for sure. It's basically the whole. I feel like the whole idea of the school is just like do whatever you want. Just go for it. You have an idea, do it. We'll help you, which is really great and very different from what I'm used to. Like, that's not a conventional university education in any form. That I mean, maybe for Finland it is, but not from where I'm from. So, uh, yeah, I mean, it took some getting used to, and you really have to work on developing your own initiative because they're not going to make you do anything. If you're not going to do it, then that's up to you. You could coast through this program, just completing assignments and just barely scraping by if you wanted, but what would be the point,
You
right?
wouldn't be learning. Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah, this program has a lot more freedom, and it's been difficult to adjust to that because of the structure of the IB that I was used to before, where you just have assignment after assignment, and it's very clear what you have to do next. Here, there's a little bit of that, but to a much lesser extent. So, if anything, I've sort of had to unlearn a few of the things I learned in the IB, but um, yeah, I'm just glad I don't have to write any academic papers, Like I got pretty good at that, but
Until we
not
write the
having
thesis.
yeah, then those skills will come into play. But you know what? Like one large academic paper in a 4-year degree sounds pretty nice to me.
With TAMK, it's been really nice to have like just be able to do what you want and study what you want rather than because I know a lot of also schools like in the States and does you correct me if I'm wrong, but in Canada, like for example, like liberal arts, you have to still take courses that aren't really related to your degree program. I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but it is in the States. So
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing in Canada. Um, but yeah, I love the freedom here. It's once you get used to it, it's very nice to be like, oh, I can do pretty much anything. Cool.
So going back to the podcast, because I actually had another question, was because podcasts are kind of like the new hot topic or medium right now. I guess they've been around obviously for a while and have been radios before that. And it's not like a new concept, but I feel like recently they've been very popular and just everyone seems to be making a podcast. So where do you think podcasts are going and what kind of future do you see for the industry? Because right now there isn't a podcast industry per se. I think it's still very separated, like radio and then music industry, but podcasts aren't really an industry right now. At least in my eyes, I don't know if being in music production, if you can see anything different than that. So, what's kind of your opinion in that?
Well, yeah, I think what's great about it is the lack of industry. It's like the Wild West, basically. Anyone can make a podcast, and anyone can blow up in the podcast sphere. There's not much really holding you back. So, and I think it's like taking the place of radio because people don't, I don't know, people still drive, people still want to listen to, like a podcast in the background or like radio like they would have in the past. But I think just it's the amount of creativity that like you're allowed to have. You can make a podcast about anything because there aren't producers saying no, don't do this or no, don't do that. So it's allowing for new things that wouldn't have otherwise surfaced to like come to the top. So I think it's just a little bit like YouTube, like in that same sort of revolution that video went through when YouTube came out. You know, it's happening and has been happening for a while with the podcast. I honestly don't know where it's going. I haven't spent enough time, I don't think, in the podcast industry itself to like make an educated guess, but I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm jumping on the boat anyway, so we'll see.
I mean, it's a good boat to jump on. Like you said, it's basically like YouTube for video of just like anyone can do it and anyone can blow up. So I think is a really interesting industry to look at. Or not industry isn't the right word because it isn't an industry. It's medium, I guess, is more accurate of a term. So I think it is just very interesting and kind of just changing how constantly changing our entertainment and media is. Very cool that you undertaken this project and decided that, I'm going to just do it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I realized that was like just a blank statement, but yeah. So you have the first season of based in Finland, and you're interviewing expatriates in Finland. So,
Yeah.
but what's the plan after that, or do you have one?
No plan at the moment. I'm gonna see where it goes from here. Just because podcasts, as I've been discovering with this, are, I mean, possibly easier than making a YouTube video, but a decent amount of work, especially the way I'm doing it with promoting it and everything all at the same time. I mean, I do have 2 teammates helping me with it, but even then, it's a significant undertaking. So it'll kind of depend on if people want to hear more. Maybe I'll make, a Q&A episode or a feedback episode at the end of the first season, see what people's thoughts were, what they'd like to hear in the future. And I think the format might change a little bit. It's difficult to maintain this sort of interview style kind of thing that I'm trying to do, because it means you need a new guest every week, and acquiring new guests is sometimes difficult, especially in these times. So I think that maybe the format might change to where I have a co-host, or I'm just by myself mostly in the occasional interview. We'll have to see. I definitely want to expand outside of Finland once I'm done with these first 6 episodes. Talk to some people elsewhere around the world, but we'll have to see.
And actually, I realized when you were talking that I didn't actually ask you about the process of how, because you mentioned you have 2 teammates with you and that it's been actually kind of a undertaking of a project. So, like, actually, can you tell me more about what has gone into making this podcast?
Well, there was a lot of procrastination, as is always the case with me. But once I actually got down to doing it, recording is easy enough. Writing a script isn't too difficult for me when I'm writing a monologue. That's not so difficult. The harder part is getting the editing done and choosing what you want to go in there. And sort of, I can't imagine what it's like for people who do multiple episodes a week. They must just have, I think once you get the system going, you can kind of make an assembly line for it. But I think it's just at the beginning, it's a few little rough patches, figuring out how things work. Right now, what's difficult is consistency on a technical level, getting the same sound every single time, that kind of thing. But that's not so important. What's more important is that you're getting content out there and that people can hear you, because most people aren't going to be like, oh, his mic is placed slightly differently and he's edited himself differently. Like, those things don't matter so much at the end of the day. But for me, I've been sort of struggling to try and think of ways to make it more efficient. But I'm sure I'll figure them out as I go. Maybe watch a few videos and see what people suggest.
That's why your project is so interesting, because you're taking kind of a lot of different, what is it, different like tasks, that you didn't really know before, and now you've created this project where you're able to learn more but create something that's really interesting and has a lot of value.
Yeah. I feel like I've been sort of just like sitting around accumulating skills for a little while, and I felt like I need a proper project to sort of apply them to. I like to sit back and absorb for a little bit. I think as well, I think that's also important. I like to feel like I'm also ready, like that I have like at least some of the skill set necessary to approach a task before I start doing it. Because I mean, it's like I did earlier say it's nice to just really do things, but it does also make sense to make sure you're not going to just flop on your face when you try. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think marketing is something that people tend to neglect a little bit. Like, I know I have a lot of friends who some people are really good with it, and then other people will just like post their music and be like, it's here. Like one post up, and I'm like, okay, you gotta shove it, like you gotta really shove it down people's throats a little bit more than that. Like, I know people get all modest about it. Maybe it's also some of my Finnish friends who feel a little bit less, comfortable doing that. But it really, like, as long as you're not being like aggressive or annoying, people aren't going to mind that you're just sharing your music with them or your
Exactly.
podcast.
Exactly. And I think that's you, like, how I know you have the Instagram for the expat. Actually, would you like to do a quick little promo right here? Where can we find the podcast?
You can find it at the Expat Pod on Instagram and Twitter, as well as the Expatriate on Facebook.
Very nice. And you can find the podcast on all platforms now, correct?
Yeah, it's up everywhere.
That's amazing.
I got an email from my host today that it's up on iTunes and Apple Music, so pretty stoked.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you for coming on today. And
thank you for having me.
Yes. And yeah, everyone can go check out podcasts now. Yeah.